this meeting of the Virginia City Council to order. February 27th, 5:30. Will everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I don't know of any amendments to the agenda, at least at this point, so we'll go on to visitors. Are any visitors wanting to make any comments on anything that is not on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, go right to it.
Good. My name's John Strout again, and I'm a representative on the Addison County Northwest School District Board from Vergennes. And I'd just like to make you all aware that last night we presented our budget and took questions from the audience, and we also presented and moved through our annual report. And I'd just like to make you aware, we'll be back again at the annual meeting to make a little longer talk to the public. But I wanted to take the opportunity to just let you know some of the basic numbers. The budget that has been brought forward is right here in the warning. Sorry. $21,106,261 for an equalized per pupil spending of $17,644. That the budget number represents a slight budget cut from last year, and the equalized per pupil number represents a less than inflation increase, about 1.67 increase in per pupil spending. And as I said last night in my budget presentation, that I think this is a responsible budget that balances some decreases in the student enrollment size, as well as maintaining all of our programs. So we'll take any questions, or we can just leave it at that.
If you would send me an email, or send it to Mel if you don't have my email, just reminding me about the annual meeting, because if you want to have some time on there, I'll put you on the agenda.
That would be great. Thank you very much. I would really appreciate that.
That'd be great.
Any?
Are you doing the security system,
In the bond?
the security system in the school? Were you the one who presented that a couple of weeks ago?
Yes.
Yes, exactly right.
Okay.
Here.
I had a question about the security of the doors.
Correct, yes.
If you remember, the last time we had an incident where the athletic field door was blocked open,
Yes.
and people gained unauthorized entrance. Now, listening to your presentation, you said that the new security system will alarm the doors.
That's correct.
Okay, I had a couple of questions. Will the door access have a central control point? In other words, doors can be opened or locked from a central point in the school?
I believe it's correct that they can be locked. I'm not sure, I mean, I guess I would assume that they can be unlocked. I know that there's a central control that will be alerted, but I am uncertain about the locking mechanism. But can I take that question and I can respond back?
Another question I had was, you just opened the door regarding the alert that the door is open, and I believe you specified a 2-minute allowance. You could leave the door open for 2 minutes. I'm assuming it's an unauthorized door opening. If it's authorized, then you're not going to need to alarm.
Right, exactly.
Which would make sense. So if it's an authorized opening
Yes.
of any given portal, before an alarm sounds, you're looking at 2 minutes.
Yes.
During that 2-minute period, what happens if the door is closed? Does that nullify the alarm?
That's a really good question. I'm not certain about the 2 minutes.
Okay?
I mean, I just don't know the exact mechanism of how much the time works, and I wish that Kim was here.
Sure.
So, can I take those questions and just respond to them back
As
to you?
long as you're thinking in that, and can you see where I'm going?
Yeah, absolutely. I do, absolutely.
The door is open for 2 minutes before an alarm goes off. A lot can happen in that 2 minutes.
As I understood it, and I could be incorrect, it will notify central office that the door is open immediately. A sound will start after 2 minutes.
That's kind of what I was on.
I think that's what's going, so if it's left open, then it might be that somebody bumped it by mistake and no one really knows, and central office hasn't gotten down there and they can close it then. But I think that there's an immediate notification that this door has been open and maybe somebody should go check.
Okay, and that alarm will remain on until central dispatch, if you will, central control, investigates and turns it off.
Ken would know best, but that would make sense.
Well, questions asked.
Yep.
And Lowell knows where I'm coming from because we dealt with a very similar alarm system down at UTC for a lot of years.
Okay.
Pulse badge actuated entry.
You're right.
Every badge we had down there, if you did not need to be in a given area,
Right.
you're in the plant.
Yeah.
But if you don't need to be in a given lab, you don't have badge access to that lab.
That's a part of the system as well.
It is?
Yes.
Okay, you're,
Like your fobs or access.
Key cards.
to rooms.
student ID,
Things like that, yeah.
no, those are all pre-programmed through the office based on the need of that individual student to be in certain gym or lab or classroom or wherever, or even in the building.
I guess it could possibly be used in that way. I'm not certain exactly.
I don't know how we're going to program it, but
But I do know that like a fob system, to be able to access to various areas of the schools is a part of this project.
And the system will also notify or record if somebody attempted unauthorized access to any given portal. It would show that that badge had been waived at that portal, access denied, but we know who tried to get in there. And that might prompt a question somewhere down the line, what business did you have trying to get into that
Yeah.
lab or
Yeah.
that maintenance?
I think those are good questions.
Well, these are all things that are essential in the business that we lived in for a lot of years. Essential for any number of reasons. Security is the big thing. And we had some growing pains with the system, but it was so selective that if you didn't need to be in a particular area, you had to go through some different layers of authorization to get your badge accessed or coded so you could get in there. It might not be a bad series of questions for you to think about when you're
Did you write that
chatting.
down?
sure.
Sure, keep memorizing this.
Got it right here.
Lowell can talk to this.
Great.
Because it's a UTC scenario that I'm referring to, and Lowell, I'm assuming you're still down there.
I'll have Ken talk me through, but my understanding is that in the bond, the security systems at the doors are going to be state-of-the-art. I've heard Ken use those words, and I certainly expect them to be able to do the things that we need to do to ensure that people are where they are, and they're supposed to be there, and that unauthorized intrusions are
Minimized.
almost impossible, if not impossible.
Okay?
Thank you.
My point was that a silent alarm at an unauthorized access portal is not a deterrent. If you've got something that screams immediately, it's a deterrent. If it's silent and it's only sounding at some remote location, it doesn't have the deterrent effect that a screaming alarm does.
But you'd also want a screaming alarm going off in the middle of the school day if it's accidentally bumped door open and now you have.
Well, guess who's not going to be accidentally bumping that door open too often?
We're talking about teenagers.
They can learn, it's a great deterrent, especially these days, pick up the paper.
Okay.
Anyway,
Okay.
Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment on anything that is not on the agenda?
Michelle Eccles from VCAM, just coming because it's going to be March on Thursday, and I know sometimes other people aren't thinking about the swimming pool yet at that point, but we sure are at Gen Swim Team. And we had talked in the fall, and I do apologize bringing this, and I'm bringing it to hand to Mel so it can be in your packets for the next meeting, but it is the timeline that the pool advisory group had been asked to kind of put together for what it's worth about opening the pool and ordering supplies, and we all know that we've got a couple big things like the hot water coming up. So I have that, and I would just love to leave that if possible, and maybe be on the agenda next meeting to start talking about pool again, if that
Yes.
is okay? Okay, so again, I apologize for, but I'm just gonna hand this.
Oh, don't apologize, thank you.
No worries.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Is there anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to approval of minutes and the warrants. I think the warrants have been circulated. Any questions on the warrants? And so we move to the minutes of February 13th. I need a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Second. It's been seconded, moved and seconded. Any alterations to the minutes?
Page 1. Third line from the bottom, air conditioning in a few classes. I assume that is classrooms, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. That was all.
Okay, I have one, minor one. Last page, first line. It says, at Gatsby 34 regulation, just strike out 34. I didn't put it in the numbers. There are so many of them that just the Gatsby regulations, we'll figure out which ones when we get to that point. Any other changes? If not, we'll be voting on the minutes as amended. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we move on, thank you. No, no. Actually, I jumped ahead. I said visitors, and then I got citizens' comments. Okay, so we can bypass the citizens' comments because we've already done that. We're into the business meeting. All right, the first item on the business meeting is 5A, resolution for downtown transportation fund grant, Park Street Streetscape project. And let me explain why this is back to us, a couple of reasons, actually. Because at the last meeting, it was voted to go with the project. However, in going through the grant application, the VTrans requires for this that you use their resolution. So you can't just, in a meeting, vote it. You have to use their resolution, which has to be signed by the city council. So that's one of the reasons why it's back. And there's some comments that the church would like to make relative to the project for us to consider before making any or another vote on this particular issue. So, Sarah squared.
Sarah. Thank you for letting us speak again, and I want to apologize for our lack of preparation, I guess. At the last city council we were at, we were very enthusiastic about the process, but quite honestly not totally ready for policy action by the city council. We were very pleasantly surprised by the motion that passed at the last meeting, and we're grateful for the city's support for the grant application. But we had to go back to our vestry last week and are here to report those results out, and we have a request for city council. So the report is that our vestry met last Tuesday and passed several resolutions. First, we support the improvement of parish property in partnership with the city of Vergennes to the benefit of Vergennes and the wider community. So an indication of the vestry support for this project in its many phases. The second motion that supported had to do with the financing of the grant that passed in the motion that city council put forward last week. We discussed in the vestry meeting the financing arrangement, and the vestry authorized Sarah and I to ask you all to reconsider that formula. So we are here to respectfully request that the City Council approve allocation from the Water Tower Fund in the amount of 50% of the total grant rather than 25%. The two reasons I'll state at the outset. First, this is city property, so we would argue that this is a city responsibility. We are not asking for improvements to parish property or something that would affect the kind of functioning of our property. Second, we are not trying to skirt our responsibility to and contributions to this project, but we do have time and effort dedicated to this multi-phase effort. We also have a limited budget, and we will be spending our resources on this project, but we have limited resources. So if we put money towards the sidewalk grant, that's money that won't be available for improving the space that we want to make available for public use.
Well, I guess I'll say the comment that I said the last time, and that is, compared to some of our other projects, this is different. The projects that we've done, and I think we've done over the years 9 of them, the share has been to businesses, and what it has done is help those businesses actually do business. Because many of the buildings needed to have handicap accessibility in order to do some of the things they wanted to do in the building. And unless the city actually did that and created that, they would not be able to do the things they did. So it actually had a commercial value related to doing the streetscape. In this particular case, it doesn't have a commercial value, or it might have a wider commercial value to everyone. But really, the investment in it is creating more park space for the community, because the intention is for that space to be rebuilt, which is now private space, to become public space. So I think it is a different situation, whether that justifies the city paying the whole 50% rather than the 25%. That's for us to decide, and this is the decision point, because the resolution that we have says to VTrans, we are putting up the 50%. So if we're not willing to put up the 50%, if we're not getting 25% of it back, then we have to make that decision now. So, anyone have any comments or suggestions?
Let me just ask this question, and I thought about it after you left the other day. Who's going to maintain this new park? Who's actually going to maintain that?
Well, boy, you're thinking way ahead of us, Lynn, but first of all, we see the sidewalk improvement as being part of a way of not letting, because the public can come on to St. Paul's property at any time, but to maybe more invite the public onto St. Paul. So we know that the sidewalk is part of it, but it's not the whole thing. It's what we do beyond that retaining wall towards the St. Paul's Church that's really going to matter, and we understand that that's our responsibility. So from a funding perspective, we know that we have a tremendous amount of funding to continue that park, if you will, onto the St. Paul's property. As far as maintaining it, as I said, you're a few steps ahead of us, but I think at the same time, we didn't make a resolution at our vestry meeting specific to maintaining that property, but we understand we have an obligation and a responsibility to do that. We already cut the lawn and plow and shovel in the wintertime. I don't see any of that changing. So we're not asking the city to maintain the church property. The city owns the sidewalk. We currently shovel the sidewalk. We're hoping that maybe when the city expands the sidewalk, they might be able to run their little,
snowplow?
sidewalk snowplow down it, so that we don't have to do that. But currently, we're already doing that, because otherwise you can't walk on that sidewalk on a Sunday morning and into church. So we absolutely understand our responsibility to maintain the church property. Whether the city will run their plow down it in the winter, because now they can, it's wide enough. With this improvement, that would be wonderful, but.
I didn't bring my notes, but what is it going to cost for the sidewalk part?
$92,000.
Okay, so you'd be asking for half of that.
The estimate that was in your packet last time, Lynn, attempted to separate that portion of the work that was within the city right away, which included the curbing, a 5-foot wide sidewalk, and the retaining wall. And so, those three things, if you will, along with the demolition of the existing sidewalk, that's what totaled to that 90, based on Norm LeBeff's estimate of $92,500. So it included all of those components.
We expect the project from the retaining wall in towards the church, including the windows. The windows, to us is part of that because it's a beautiful backdrop. But even without the windows, the landscape improvements are going to be substantial. So for us to assume that we're going to be looking at probably at least that amount on our side of the wall, I think is very realistic, if not a higher number. And that's just this, what we're calling the Park Street portion of it. We also have, we have plans to continue that around both the front side on Main Street and then the handicap accessibility of the church. That's the church's responsibility, we understand that. The handicap accessibility. But at this point, the Park Street portion of that, for that amount of money that Sarah's talking about, that we would otherwise have to contribute to the sidewalk project, we fully intend to spend on church property. And a lot more.
Okay, I'll need a motion to adopt this resolution. Have to get it on the floor, even if you're going to do something different
I'll move
with
the
it.
motion, at least for discussion, yes.
I will second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded on this resolution. I will not read the resolution. It's just in the format that that V-Trans requires for this. So, is there any discussion on this?
So basically, we're talking about $46,000, yeah.
Yeah, the way that I see it, Rennie, is at the last meeting, there was a motion. Alderman Lowell Bertrand moved to authorize the Park Street Streetscape project with 50%, $46,250, of the funding to come from the Water Tower Fund on the condition that St. Paul's Church pay back 25%, $23,125 over a 5-year period. I think what your request is to change that motion or make a new motion and approve this resolution. Because if you just adopt this resolution, that's okay, but this resolution does not change that motion that you made at the last meeting. So I think you need to either handle these things separately or in one motion.
Okay, so I was looking at what you sent us on the Water Tower Fund and our obligations. So, I mean, I want to make sure this is possible to begin with, so,
Yeah, there's later on under my report, if you want to, just so you need to know how much, if you want to know how much money is in that
right,
fund.
right.
Let me, to my knowledge, and I think that I'm correct here, this is as of, let's call it today, I did this last Friday, the available funds This is after Joan. There's still 15,000. Actually, the 15,000 that moves from the police department over really doesn't affect this at all because that's continuation fund money. So the tower fund available right now is $250,122.78. The encumbrances, the only encumbrance that I am aware of to this deals with the Northern Gateway Sidewalk Extension Project, of which the city received a $274,500 grant, and our local share is $30,500. And you can see up above, I could have done this math for you, but if you look up into the actuals and you see the four bills to Stantec Consulting Services, that represents 10% of those invoices. And what you're not seeing here is 10% of Dave Crawford's project management, and it's just the way that we do payroll. It's all payroll related. We can't code somebody's payroll 90% here and 10% here, without, let's Joan. So so what we do is we periodically do a journal entry to push that number across. So anyway, my point is that if you were to take 30,500 and subtract those four numbers, that is the amount of money left out of that $30,500 allocation that you made a year or so ago. I don't know of any other, you can see the partnership money has been transferred. I really cannot think of any other project.
Well, is some of the pool allocation that they're asking for, is that going to come out of here?
That's watershed money.
Watershed.
Well, it could come out of here. It could come out of the water tower money, but the allocation to the budget, the swimming pool budget, that $11,000 that it's been the last year or so has come out of watershed money, not water tower money.
Those two are very confusing.
So I guess if you go forward with this resolution, just this part of it, the resolution, then that's saying to VTrans that we are putting up the 50%. That's our guarantee to them when the grant goes in. They really don't care where we're getting the money from, actually, as long as we guarantee that we give them the money. So if you go forward with the resolution, you're obligating the city to spend that money. Then you'd have to do something as Mel has said. We'd have to put another motion on the floor to rescind, if you want to, the previous motion. If you let the previous motion stand, then there will be an expectation that there's 25% coming from the church, which may or may not come.
Well, in the church, if that's what you're considering, then the church should be making it crystal clear
Whether it's coming or
up
not.
front that they don't want you applying for this grant. I mean, let's be honest here, all right? So, because really, if we're applying for the grant under that condition, then, we need to be honest with ourselves. We're either expecting it or we're not expecting it.
And I apologize in advance. I can't support an additional 23,000 plus going into this project. I appreciate the intent. I think that the direction is very clear. I still think that having the retaining wall presents a geographical and then therefore a mental barrier that, the sidewalk is one thing, but it's still going to be perceived as church property. I have had some feedback that people aren't certain that the city should be involved in that project. And I guess I'm just reluctant to change the resolution that we passed at our last meeting.
I would also have a concern, not for that, but for setting precedent, that if we've traditionally done 50%, 25-25, splitting it that way, and then we do this, what happens to the next group that has a reason? Is it business saying, well, last time you did it this way, and why are we needing to do it differently? And there might be good notification, but it becomes much more blurry as to how we go forward with future projects and whether they're businesses or nonprofits or religious or, and it runs the waters.
So, Rennie, let me, in the spirit of full disclosure, there's been a number of exceptions, Mark, relative to the so-called formula. Rennie is absolutely correct, to my knowledge, that the 50%, 25-25, that was the formula that, whether or not that was when Rennie was city manager or before him or handed down to me, that's been the formula. And the loaning of funds, as I mentioned to you, the first one that I inherited was the one in front of Luigi's and the pharmacy and my brother my building, and the three property owners were expected to pony up, on a lineal foot basis, 1/4 of that project. The other projects have used that same formula, but I will tell you that if you recall, when the theater project was done, we applied for that grant and we did not get funding. But because the city council really supported that project, that formula was 25% property owner, 75% water tower fund, because there was no grant money. And then I'll go on to another one. Obviously, we replaced the sidewalk in front of City Hall. All right, city's the landowner, so we paid 50% of that. But what might be more applicable deals with the project on the other side of the road. There was a very small project which it was in front of the Methodist Church and the other building. It used to be the in between the Methodist Church and the Ryan Block. We did that short stretch there, granite curbing, sidewalk. We did do some concrete work back onto and towards the handicap entrance for the Methodist Church, and the Methodist Church nor that property owner funded any part of that project. So that one was done identical, if you will, to the one in front of City Hall with no local share. Now, you could say, well, there's a precedent. Well, we could sit here and say, well, yeah, that's a precedent, but what was the precedent? Do you say that in their instance, in front of churches, there is no share by the church? Or is the precedent, well, how much money did the Methodist Church not have to pay? And let's say the Methodist Church did not have to pay $8,750. Then maybe the precedent is that instead of $23,125, St. Paul's gets the same benefit that the Methodist Church did of $8,750, and their share would be offset and be $1,400. So obviously this is a little odd in front of the cameras to be holding this negotiation, if you will, but I want to make sure that there's full disclosure out there about how all of these projects are done. Everyone's got a twist. I could go on till, and our firemen are waiting patiently.
So if you hold that thought, and you'll have a little bit of time to be able to think about it, because I have to recess the regular meeting and open the public informational hearing regarding the bond. So I will read the notice. Pursuant to 17 VSA Section 2680G, the qualified voters of the City of Vergennes are hereby warned and notified that a public informational hearing will be held on Tuesday, February 27th, 2018 at 6 p.m. at the Vergennes Fire Station Meeting Room located at 15 Green Street for the purpose of hearing comments and addressing questions regarding a bond vote to replace an existing fire truck. The estimated cost of the new fire truck is $500,000. The article as it appears in the city's Australian ballot is as follows. Shall the bonds of the City of Vergennes in an amount not to exceed $500,000 be issued for the purpose of purchasing a new fire truck to replace engine 316? The above article will be voted by Australian ballot on Tuesday, March 6th, 2018, at the Vergennes Fire Station located at 15 Green Street. The polls will be open from 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. So now I open the hearing. And Chief, do you want to do any kind of a presentation on this?
Well, I really was just kind of here for question and answer session, not really a presentation. Basically, as you had said, we're looking at replacing the 1994, our engine 1, which was engine 316 at the time. And this is still the number that's on it. We really don't buy numbers anymore. That's the old school. And again, we've spent many hours speccing out a truck, trying to keep everything as best we can. And going forward, we're looking for a bond goal, as we discussed, bond of $500,000. Truck is going to be roughly $520,000. Looking for any discussion. We did break blueprint down. If you want, we can tack up on the board, and if you want, you go just set it up so we can get an idea of what the truck is, or we can set it around. Like I said, everybody's
So one thing, Rennie, is, and I think everybody agrees, when you start talking about a truck, $500,000, your jaw drops a little bit, because for years and years, we bought used fire trucks for $20,000 or $30,000 and beat them up and threw them away and went and found another one. Well, that used to work. I've mentioned this before. I've told this story. That used to work for years because major metropolitan areas, they had a policy that said that their frontline pumper would never be older than 7 years. And so that's some nice hand-me-downs to a community like Vergennes. That policy has totally gone by the wayside. They aren't getting rid of their frontline pumpers in 7 years. They're doing basically the same thing that we're doing. We're seeing how many years we can get out of that truck. So it is amazing how fast time goes by. It seems like it was only yesterday when we went in front of the voters and had them approve the pumper and the pumper tanker in 1993, and we ended up having those trucks delivered in 1994, and here it is 2018. And whoever thought that our frontline apparatus would be 25 years. So it is something we can't wait around forever because you aren't going to be able to get, we already have problems right now without being able to get parts for this equipment. And so obviously we don't want to be the ones calling somebody up, say we'd love to come put your house out, but we don't have any parts for the truck. So we've got to have quality equipment here. So
right now we're looking for a part for the Class A foam for that truck right now. The only place we can go is on the eBay. So we're playing with eBay, hoping that we can find the part because they just don't make it. It's obsolete. So that's the stuff we run into when you start getting into that age of equipment.
So one of the things that I wanted to do for the council, I put it in front of you, was about tax impact as a result of this potential purchase. And again, the fire department serves all of Vergennes, all of Panton, all of Waltham, and slightly less than half of the town of Ferrisburgh. As you can see, 45.5% of the town. So what this chart displays is on the assumption that the voters would approve this and we would move into the November bond sale. And I think that they do this only once a year, so more than likely we would be in that sale, and they in essence would, although we wouldn't necessarily need that money on the 1st of November, I think you could do some short-term borrowing, but just for illustration purposes, let's say that that the voters approve this and we went into the November sale. What happens is you pay interest only for the first year, and then you move forward with interest. And so under that schedule, the FY 2019, you can see the interest share between the November bill and the May bill is $11,200. $162. And when you run it through this spreadsheet, the resulting tax rate increase to Vergennes, Panton, and Waltham is it's very close to 0.2 cents. So it's less than 1/4 cent on the tax rate. You'll notice that Ferrisburg is only 0.09, and that's because they'll be spreading that over their entire tax base, whereby the other 3 towns would be spreading it out over, we only have 1 tax base. So, and then the second year when the $25,000 principal pay downs, that interest and principal would be $38,804, and you can see that the resulting tax rate would be about 2/3 cent. And that number will diminish slightly over time because it's interest. It's not like bonds are not typically set up like your house payment where you pay the same amount every month. The way that bonds are set up, you pay 1/20th of the bond for 20 years and you pay interest on the outstanding balance. So the resulting tax rate for Vergennes, Panton, and Waltham, once the bond payments are made, is 2/3 cent. In the case of the town of Ferrisburg, it would be not 2/3, but slightly under 1/3, 0.3. So it's not, you know, I don't want to say that it's not huge. It's real money. You know, we're going to have to actually cut a real check for $38,000. But the impact is not, it's not some huge, going to be, cause some huge bump in our overall tax rate.
Are there any, Bob?
Got a question for the chief. You have a pretty rigorous maintenance schedule for your equipment?
We do.
So you've collected enough data. You opened the door when you said having trouble finding parts for. My question is, with the maintenance schedules that you maintain, the data that you collect regarding parts that you have replaced, you should have enough data to determine mean time before failure incidents and do some spares provisioning if you know, because of past history, that a certain component, given X number of hours in service, is probably likely going to fail. Let's have a couple of extras on, especially if it's a really unique item, pipe, fitting, something that is built for that particular application. Would it make sense to do a little bit of spares provisioning or build it into the original purchase contract?
In this case, I would say no, and here's the reason why. As technology changes, okay, this is the first truck that we've ever had that had Class A foam system built on it. Okay, Class A foam is something that we use in structure fires, and we do also use them in brush fires and grass fires. So the piece that's gone bad on this truck is a computer. So to sit here and purchase a $10,000 or $15,000 computer or even more at the point in time when you're purchasing it, you've never had it before, so you don't know how long it's actually going to last. Going forward, in my mind, is a waste of money. Because what if, and I'm not saying it would or wouldn't, and I understand preventative maintenance because I have to deal with that all the time, not only here, but I also deal with it at work, and predictive maintenance. But what if I spent all that money for all these spare parts and nothing went wrong, but yet it's time to replace a vehicle? Because let's face it, how many of you have a vehicle that's 20-some years old? It's 20 years old and you're still running. What you have to look at as you're looking at this is that these pieces of apparatus, when we run them, okay, they sit here in the station. We get a call, right? We come in, we jump in the station, we fire them and go. It's hard on a vehicle, when you're running and stuff like that. Yes, we do. We've got a good maintenance program. We do have documentation that we carry, We do have pieces that, you know, are commonly, that go bad, we keep up. But when you have the specialized units that's in a specific truck, no, you don't carry that, because that's a lot of money, and you're taking it, it's a what if.
Yeah, of course, cost would be a prohibitive factor. You don't want to have a lot of money in your spares inventory.
Right, and then if you have the spares inventory and you go and replace the truck, that's no good, because the technology's changed so much.
Except as it applies to that particular system. In which
Exactly.
case, the spares would go with the unit because they're not applicable anywhere else.
Right, but then again, you're not gonna get, if I paid $10,000 for this part in 1994, and it sat on the shelf, and I sold this truck, I'm not gonna get $10,000 for that part when I go to sell that truck.
Well, there is some question about that too, because if it's susceptible to failure, and you have the only one replacement, guess what? Someone's
Yeah,
gonna
I
pay
mean,
for it.
but again,
There's not gonna be many
how
out
can
there,
you-
though.
Who can afford to have that much
Well, that's true.
parts sitting?
Yeah. You don't realize the value until you sell the unit,
Correct.
and then the spares typically go with the unit if they're unique to it. That's a negotiating. Just a question. Thank you.
Are there any others that have a comment or question for the chief or for the council? If not, I'll close this hearing and we'll go back to our regular meeting. Thank you, Chief. Thanks, Chief. Okay, we are back to resolution for downtown transportation fund grant. See if I can ferret this one out. So we have a motion on the floor for this resolution, and you have a-
If I can step in to address some of the concerns that were raised before the break. I do want to make clear that the church really wants to make this work. It's not that we can't contribute some to the project, it's just that the costs of contributing to the sidewalk take away from the money available for other parts of the project. I looked in my tiny print on my phone at the language of the Water Tower Fund. And the Water Tower Fund, I think the allocation from that fund is a really appropriate one for this project. The language says that the Water Tower Fund is for capital improvements of city-owned facilities or for the purpose of economic development. Now, I would say the sidewalk projects that I think of as models, like the one in front of the hired hand, are wonderful and they have some public benefit, but a lot of the benefits are private. As much as I love the hired hand, and I do, and the benefits of having people come and spend money in our town, I think are wonderful. But the fund language starts off with capital improvements of city-owned facilities, and this is a city-owned sidewalk. Mark, I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate the additional information about the precedents here. I would say that there is a case to be made that this is an exceptional project because it is next to the downtown green. We are talking about public space in the center of town, and I think that that is a gathering space for our public within this community and the surrounding communities. So if there is a precedent, if there's a concern about setting a precedent, I think our central location and our ability to uniquely expand the public space in downtown Vergennes makes the case for an exception. The last thing I'll say, and Matt, I very much appreciate your concerns. I know that we're a religious institution and that raises some concerns, and this is a lot of money perhaps that we're asking for, but our private space already serves a public use. People gather on our property at Memorial Day, on Vergennes Day, during the holiday stroll. We have AA meetings there every week. The Girl Scouts meet in our space. One of the things that our vestry and our committee has been doing for years now is to rethink the way our space works, to take our private space and make it better serve us as a religious institution, but also definitely serve our mission, which is to engage with the public and serve the community. So I know that there may be some concern about how the city is helping the church in this way. Our instinct here is, as a church, one of our missions is community service and community engagement, and that reworking our private space better helps us serve that mission.
Okay. All right.
So, Mel, I think what I heard you say was there is no strict formula for terms.
That's correct.
So my question to you is, Matt is absolutely right. It's a lot of money, and we have a lot of places to use that money. But I wonder, is it so much the amount as it might be the terms for St. Paul's? Might there be some way we could come up with more amenable terms for everyone?
It's the amount.
It is the amount.
Could St. Paul's come up with $23,000 over 5 years? Sure. There would be a lot of people that would work hard to make that happen. If we didn't pull it out of funds that we have that have possible use, that could be used for this type of a purpose. We have designated funds that we could use if we weren't using it for other purposes. It really comes back to, yes, this is a city project, the sidewalk. We've spent an awful lot of time over the past 3 years talking about, as Sarah said, how we can make our property more accessible to the greater public and to the community. And we understand that we have a big commitment, as I said, on our side of the retaining wall. It's not just up to that retaining wall we're looking to improve. And we hope that there will be some inviting stairways and park-like space that the public will feel comfortable in using, and we're going to do everything that we can to publicize that, whether it's with gentle signs or, you know, however else we do it. We really want people to use our property. And yeah, we also feel like we've got some pretty darn good real estate right on the corner of the green. It's very important space for the city. And this is one way that we're able to then take care of the rest of the property. And I think that's something that shouldn't get lost here. If you take a picture of the city green, you're going to see this building, this property in the background of that. That's part of what you see when you come and you enjoy the green. And I think that's something we have to remember here. This isn't just about, it's absolutely not about helping the church. This is about helping the downtown improve and to make it more accessible for people. So.
I have a question. Somewhat critical question. If we proceed with this and the formula that was voted at the last meeting stands, then there will be an expectation that the church would come up with $23,125 over 5 years. Is the church going to do that, or is it not going to do that?
We want this project to go forward. If the project goes forward with that formula, honestly, it probably impedes our ability to move forward on the other parts of the project, which are about creating that public gathering space. That doesn't mean that we don't do those other parts of the project. It just means that it's going to take us longer, given our limited resources, to come up with that.
I'd like to just, putting the park part of it aside, and I think some of this is getting kind of washed aside because of the park. If we come back to the sidewalk and just talk about the sidewalk and making both sidewalks, you have to watch single file, both sides of the park. And the other day, I happened to, the bus pulled up, and people were getting out of the bus onto this, I don't know why they don't do it in front of the town hall, but probably somebody was parked there, I don't even know. But anyway, I noticed the people got out, and they had to string out, not, gather like people would gather. And so after this thing, I saw a mom pushing her baby and had a toddler. The toddler had to actually walk behind the mom to get the carriage by the steps. So I think it's more than just being a church has nothing to do with it, in my mind. It has more to do with, that's an unsafe place on the main street of our, building, going to our very important town hall, or city hall. And if you're, that is an important section of the sidewalk. I'm not talking about any parks or anything else. And if there were to be a compromise, I would be for fixing the sidewalk, period. But I know that that's, I'm getting soft in my old age. But I'm not sure that we couldn't, and again, this would have to be something different thinking, is why don't we make it a 10-year payback? Why does it have to be 5? I mean, we can do whatever we want here. And whether it's creating somebody else coming and saying that, every situation is different. And every situation has its own problems. But in my view of that, from the last 2 since you were here, is it's not safe there. There's no room. You literally, you can't get by.
We would absolutely agree with that one.
I know, it's horrible.
Yeah.
And you don't think about it unless it becomes part of a conversation, and then you start noticing things. So I think that's important. And if we can't just move forward paying for the whole thing, I would like to suggest we change the terms to 10 years. And then that way you can do your projects for whatever you want. It's a very small payback per year. You get what you want. The city council still has the water tower fund protected, and we can move on, and you guys can move on and do your project. And I would like to make that as some compromise when it comes time to doing all this.
Well, since we have a motion on the floor, we'd have to deal with that motion, and then there would have to be something else that would follow it. I would just say that that sidewalk, at some point in time, the city would have to rebuild it. And if we did it and there was still the transportation fund, we would probably rebuild it and not ask for the church or anybody else to contribute, because we considered it was at a point where we had to do something. And if we can get grant money for it, great. If not, we rebuild it entirely on our own money. So I think that's a consideration given the condition of that sidewalk. I know that I walk to City Hall, because my house is just behind that all the time, and I walk in the street. I don't even use the sidewalk. So, anyhow.
I'm going to hope I don't get struck by lightning. Just step back a little bit. We as a city have gone through a comprehensive inventory of all of our sidewalks. Mm-hmm. And this is not the only dangerous, unsafe sidewalk in our community, Rennie. I fully appreciate Lynn's point of view that the terms of the loan could be renegotiated, and I would certainly support that. But again, I don't think we've ever seen a price tag as to what it would cost us to fix all of our sidewalks. I'm sure Mel off the top is, I don't want to know, I'm sure. So I guess we would come back to Sarah and Sarah, is there any potential for the church to consider a 10-year term versus a 5-year, and does that change your equation on your presentation this evening?
I would say yes. I mean, as a member of vestry, we did talk about what if the city doesn't agree with this. And we didn't consider the 10-year option, but we did talk about, was there a portion that we could contribute towards this. And again, it takes away from anything else that we can do, but I guess the way I would have to leave it, because our vestry would have to approve that, is I guess I would have a fair amount of confidence that they would approve it. They don't meet until right before the grant application, I think, is supposed to be submitted, or right after. We meet the third Tuesday.
I think it is the 19th of March that it has to be submitted.
Well, we'd work that out.
Yeah.
We'd figure that out.
We did talk about different formulas and what we
Yeah.
think we could realistically
Yeah.
reach within a 5-year loan period, assuming that
Right.
that was the period. And this would be in line with those conversations that the best we thought were acceptable.
Well, that was one thing I was going to mention. We were talking about changing terms with years. We might also consider, rather than using the standard splitting 50%, 25-25, we could come up with a different percentage.
Say 30-20.
30-20, or it's split it in half again, so we would do 36-5, and they would do 12-5, and even keep that at 10 years. Just so there's some.
Well, keep in mind that we can revisit this at any time. I mean, I don't think we'll come up with the necessary formula tonight. But if we're going for the grant, we have to do something. But we can revisit it. We can change the formula later on if you wish to do that. So.
I guess the question for me is if we go ahead with the motion that's presented as it is, we're on the hook for the 50%. So if we agreed to that tonight, with the understanding that we would be renegotiating the terms with the church, I'm not sure how we'd make that a motion or whatever.
Well, if
but
we're leaving the old motion from last time the same, then the church should be at most on the hook for the 25. And we're saying we are willing to talk about this as it goes forward, so you know the most you're going to pay, and hopefully we can figure out a way to make that better. And
Would
then
that
we
be
just pass the
agreeable?
V-Tran one that's 50%, but we have a formal motion that's already been settled, and we can figure it out.
I agree.
Okay, so I guess we ought to move this question. So we've got the resolution for adoption on the floor. All those in favor of the resolution, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any opposed? Okay. I assume that we are.
That needs to be signed.
Yeah, will need to be signed. I assume that at some point in the future, we'll probably be revisiting this. And maybe there'll be able to be some conversations as to what would be a amenable kind of situation as far as whether it's more years, different percentages, or something. We can come back to this.
This is all assuming we actually got the grant in the first place, right?
Right.
That's
So if we
right.
don't get the
That's
grant, this
another
all
thing.
goes
If we
away.
get the grant, it all goes away.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll say is that the city's support for this has been instrumental in generating enthusiasm among other partners about moving forward on other fundraising initiatives. So it might make more sense to revisit this question when we have other money in hand, God willing, from other donors, and then we will have a much more specific idea of what we have available, and again, whether the grant has gone through.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we move on to item 5B, resolution to reestablish designation of senior alderman as deputy mayor. Could I have a motion to get that on the floor?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded, and I'll just make a few comments on this. This is not something that was generated or asked for by Jeff. It was brought on by me, and it's something that I've wanted to change for quite a while, actually. And it was dropped by the wayside some years ago, and by Mike Daniels, who, for whatever reason, you'll have to ask him as to why, but at any rate, This designation has been in this city for at least 25 years that I know of. It probably is more like 35 or 40 years. It's been, that's just how it's been designated for years and years and years. And I think that it's something that kind of clarifies what the senior alderman actually does, because people ask, and when I was senior alderman, and said, "Senior alderman, is that just because they're giving you some recognition that you're senior alderman?" They have no idea of what the duty of the senior alderman is, which is essentially the deputy mayor. So, with that, does anybody have any comments or questions about this resolution? Yes.
Well, I'm waiting for them.
That's right. You know, you can't, this is the budget, you know, the budget item.
I don't have my knife.
I have one.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Just carve it right out.
So, if there's no discussion, all those in favor of this resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed? Thank you.
Oh, my God.
Okay.
Probably deserves a selfie.
We're moving on to, item 5C, letter to Governor Phil Scott, request designation as an opportunity zone. I'll try and explain this somewhat as to what this is. It's really a federal thing, and an opportunity zone is where, through federal regulation, it gives businesses an opportunity to invest in other businesses, new businesses, expansions, and so on. And this particular program, the highlight of it is that it gives a tax advantage relative to paying capital gains. And so that if some individual or business makes an investment and it proves to be a good investment and they gain, they may not have to pay capital gains. And so in some instances, it would make the difference between whether a company expands or starts or not. And it happens that there are only certain census tracts that qualify for this, and Vergennes is the only census tract currently that will qualify for this in Addison County. And however, the governor only has a limited number of them that he can designate. And so in order to try and get into that limited number, we are requesting of the governor to consider us as an opportunity zone. There's also another federal program that goes along with it. I can't remember it, but it's so complex we would never use it. So that's the explanation of why this is before you. It doesn't cost us anything, but it would be helpful if the support of the city council is there to ask the governor to consider us. And also, Jeff, do you want to mention this? We received a letter, and it's a letter from Senator Ayer, Senator Bray, and Representative Lampfer, and it's really to the city council. I won't go through the whole thing, but essentially they have a letter of support that would go to the governor to help us to get this designation. So with that, are there any questions? I mean, it's just a matter of you endorsing. I guess we should have a motion that you endorse. Okay. It's been moved and seconded to endorse this letter. Anybody have any other questions? All those in favor, say aye. 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 Opposed? Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, who's second? I nod. That's why I missed it.
Okay, next item is 5D, city manager job description. A few weeks ago, I guess, this job description was put together by Mark and Jeff for the city manager. Since we will be hunting for a city manager in the near future, we need to have an accurate job description. It has been through the city council. Some changes have been made. City manager has reviewed it, some changes have been made, and we're down to our final version, which is before you. So I would need a motion to adopt this job description.
I'd like to make one more amendment.
Okay.
On human resources, plan and evaluate city employees' performance annually. Because it doesn't say when.
When? Okay. Anybody have any problem with that amendment?
No.
Okay. I still need a second on that motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other,
To approve.
No, I
Other-
actually just made an amendment.
Oh, I'm
She's
sorry.
actually-
yeah,
Yeah, so I'll make the motion then. With that-
endorse the job description,
Then I can second.
or approve the job description, I should say.
With the understanding that we'll begin to later, there'd be the committee who's doing the search. They may decide to make some amendments of their own as they're going through this and realizing. So this is still open to be tweaked later, but we're just approving this current version.
Yes.
I understand you might change in the future.
Yes, in my charge for the committee, I did put in that ability for the committee to change areas of the job description. It would still have to come back to the city council to approve it, but that they could make
This is
changes.
not locked in stone.
Mhm. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further comment? All those in favor of the job description, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Then we move on to item 5E, City Council meeting schedule. Do we actually have to adopt
Actually,
that?
I meant to put draft in front of that, because typically the council settles this thing at their meeting in March, but I wanted to get this to you early so that you could look at your personal vacation books, and this would be on the agenda again at your meeting on March 27th, and that way we can then post it on our website so that folks know when we are not meeting on the second and fourth Tuesdays is what's most important here. So, no action tonight, we just need people to look at their schedules. Rennie's already looked at his, that's why July has only one meeting, I believe.
Okay, so we move on to item 5F, appointment of an alderman. As we discussed at our previous meeting, the seat that I formerly held is open. And so it is for the city council to select a person to serve in that seat, starting in the next term. It won't be starting until after the annual meeting. So we have two candidates for that position, Faith Terry and David Austin. And so at this time, I'm going to ask each of them to make a few comments that they would like to make, tell us a little about themselves and why they want to be on the council. And we will take that into consideration. We will more than likely go into an executive session to discuss that at the end of the meeting and come out, and the decision as to who will get the position is a public vote, so we will come out and it will be voted publicly. So, in alphabetical order, I guess, Dave, it's you first.
Sure. Well, as most of you probably know, I served 4 terms as an alderman from 2004 to 2012. And during that time, I mean, it was kind of under similar circumstances to where we are now. Rennie had become city manager. I had been, prior to that, chair of the planning commission for a number of years. I had businesses and owned property here as well. The main reason that I'm here is that Mel's leaving. And I think that that's going to present some very unique challenges, both for whoever takes his position when he leaves this summer, and also what that means for the city of Regina as a whole. I've talked with each of you individually. I think you have a good cohesive group, and I think you're doing a good job. If that was not the case, I would not even consider doing this at this point, particularly having been here for 8 years prior. I had a very successful business here. I developed properties here. I owned the building that the Black Sheep Bistro is in. I also owned the green building across from City Hall that you were discussing earlier. I was a managing partner of the Otter Creek Investment Fund along with Terry. So my involvement deals with the real world aspects of economic development, both at that time and what I do currently. I get divorced. I lost control of the business. I don't recommend divorce to anyone. And if you choose that option, don't do it in Vermont. But anyway, so what I've done since then, I work as an independent consultant, primarily with small businesses. I've also dealt with similar situations with real estate in other areas, similar to what we did here in Vergennes. Typically distressed properties that you are dealing with private equity to redevelop them. That's what I do currently. My time is my own. I have about 3 hours early in the morning where I have to deal with various business interests, and then it's 3 hours at the end of the day with what occurs in another time zone. You know, from an official perspective, I mean, I can talk very briefly about what it was that I felt that I offered when I was here. I effectively shepherded the city through the process, which resulted in us creating a development review board, which paved the way for downtown designation. I believe we were actually one of the first communities in the state to achieve that. Rennie would know as well. Rennie played a very, very important role in that also. So that was a positive situation, but there were a number of negatives as well. Velco, Rennie would remember that. At the time I was chair of the Planning Commission. There were some issues relative to the council at that time. I actually drove to Montpelier and noticed an appearance before the Public Service Board as chair of the Planning Commission that effectively got the ball rolling. I didn't necessarily want to see high-tension power lines bisecting Main Street, which was the plan at the time. Sewer extension, it has been a contentious issue for about as long as I can remember in the city of Vergennes. I effectively initiated a change which vests control of that with the residents of the city as a whole. Any extension requires a referendum vote. So, you know, those are some of the key issues relative to the past. There were other issues where I had wished that I had had a seat at this table, namely when the AOT marched in here and designated 22A as a truck route. Doesn't even meet their own requirements. So I like to think that during that time period, things might have been a little different. You never know what's going to occur in the future. As far as my background, again, I have very, very extensive development, both in finance and the marketing aspects of what it actually takes to develop or restructure or position for sale, whatever it is, relative to real-world economic development. Addison County's 30-some-odd thousand people. The state is 650,000. There's very, very, very significant challenges to doing business in the state of Vermont. What Rennie just mentioned, I think, is a huge positive, and it's a no-brainer. You know, anything that we can do to position the city to attract and retain business is critically important. What would I like to accomplish in the future? I will never again be in a position where I have to commute to work and get in a car and drive every day, you know. This place is very, very unique. It developed organically over a couple hundred years. It has the potential to be a very, very walkable community. There's some steps that need to occur to get it to where it should be. Additionally, I'd like to figure out a way for us to stop dumping sewage into Otter Creek. I swim every day. I'm a distance swimmer. I'm in that lake. I was going to go down there today, but the 12-mile-an-hour wind kept me out of the water. But I think that, you know, there's a lot of unique characteristics of Vergennes. We don't know what's coming down the road. My background and what I was able to do when I was on the council previously, I think that I was an integral part of keeping things on track, and I'm willing to do it again. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, David.
Well, that's a hard act to follow. No. David, you're wonderfully articulate, who you are. I think it wasn't that the city, excuse me, if it wasn't that the city council wasn't moving forward in such an excellent way, neither of us would be here today. This was a good meeting to attend. I haven't been to any of your meetings in a long time, and it was inspirational. Truly it was. One of the things that I have the most difficult time on earth doing is talking about myself. I'm absolutely incapable of it. So you'll have to ask questions. However, I did, and I'm more comfortable with, sharing with you what my involvement in Vergennes has been over the past 35 years. And there are a number of reasons that I came forward today. I agree with David very strongly that Mel's going to be a very hard act to follow, and that this is a pivotal time for the city council in determining the next direction. And I believe that my perceptions and my experience will contribute to that. I've been here as long as Mel, in that sense. We grew up together. And I actually, today I have to tell you, I enjoyed the way you dealt with these situations. It was thoughtful, and I think all of you together have made some enlightened progress. I think none of us are capable of perfection, but if we can make some progress in our lifetime, I think that says a lot. When you were talking most recently, I, being distracted, came up with some guidance that we used when we were storing the Opera House and in some of the other rather formidable projects at the time. And it was a quote that was accredited to Von Goethe, and ends up, after I looked today, it wasn't his at all. But that's unimportant. But it is perhaps a motivation for me as to why I'm coming to you now again, stepping up, so to speak, because until one is committed, there's hesitancy, the chance to draw back, concerning all acts of initiative and creation. There's one elementary truth, that ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance which no man or woman could have dreamed would have come his or her way. Whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. The presentation that was made just about the sidewalk and about the city park and the transportation grant brings to mind that it started at one point, it went around the room several times, and you came to consensus. In all the years that I've been involved with projects here in Vermont, and specifically here in Vergennes, we moved forward because of consensus and a lot of hard work and a lot of joy. Being on the city council doesn't have to be painful. It can be pleasurable. And if you would accept my petition, for me, it would be an enjoyable experience, and that we could have fun making important and serious decisions for the community. So ask me questions.
there are any questions of either one of the candidates.
No, I
This
think
is
the
your opportunity.
presentation was excellent.
I did not give you the history of my professional expertise. I think that actions speak louder than words, and what I've done in my community as a steward, as we all are, is the most important contribution I can make.
May I ask a question,
Of
please?
course you may.
I was approached today, and it's regarding your residency. I understand you are a resident of Vergennes, but do you reside in Vergennes?
I live at this time in Middlebury. I married a man who is as dedicated to Middlebury as I am to Vergennes. And our life is, as is this community, a continuum. We move and change and we evolve as people, and in Vicinities for almost 6 years, I was not in Vergennes for most of the year, because after my beloved husband Gerald died, I traveled. It was very painful for me to be here. And I've come to terms with that over many, many years, and took my home in Vergennes off the market and embraced it once again. As you are all observing of our community, I'm a steward of that property as my home. And I pay my taxes here, I vote here, it's my chosen residence. Just as politicians spend a good part of their time in other places than where they live, or people who are seasonal people, this is my home. You know, it's part of my DNA for most of my adult life. I don't know if that answers it.
It does.
but-
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Any other questions?
I would like to say, there is one thing I need to amend in my presentation, written presentation, is when I made the decision to submit to all of you, I wrote that my involvement on the transportation, the Vermont Transportation Board, might have to be reconsidered. I spoke to the chair of the board, and he has encouraged me not to resign if I am appointed, that he feels it would strengthen the Transportation Board and also would strengthen our community for me to be involved. So,
Thank you both, and unfortunately, it'll be towards the very end of the meeting before you hear anything. Okay, city managers report.
So I think between you and me, Rennie, we have 3 minutes. This is going to be a bit of,
No, I think
so-
it'll be more than
Okay.
3 minutes.
So relative to budget report, I've done a line-by-line review of the budget, and I can tell you that the administration budget is in pretty good shape. The police department budget is not in pretty good shape. I think it's going to be, as I mentioned at the last meeting, it's going to be a bit of a challenge to keep that under the bottom line. Public Works, as long as it doesn't snow again, we are in great shape. The problem is, I've lived in Vermont all my life, and I know it's going to snow again. So I think that it would not surprise me at all. I feel good really where we're at in the Public Works budget at this point, but I know that winter's not over. There is a little room there. You'll notice in the highway improvements, we purposely only spent about half of the money in the fall, and so therefore positioning ourselves such that if we do have a real hard winter, then we might have to hold off on some projects, but we can make those decisions as we get closer to May and closer to June. Sewer department, we talked about at the last meeting. I will tell you, I haven't spent a lot of time looking at the revenues. Joan sends out the bills, and although much of the billing is done based on our fixed rate system, there's, I'll say 25% is based on the variable rate based on water usage, and in the case of Northlands Job Corps, about sewer usage. So I really don't know if we are receiving the amount of money that you intended to receive with your rate increase, and so I'll drill down on that soon, so that you know really where that's at. So that's all I had on budget report. Water tower fund, I think, Jeff, you kind of wondered where we were at, and I was not able to get this to you at the last meeting because I had a little trouble balancing this thing, but what I gave to you tonight that you took a look at really shows you really where that fund is at. And keep in mind that on the revenue side, we have 4 companies that lease space on the tower, 2 of which pay us in a lump sum, and we've already received that money. The other 2 pay us in monthly payments. One of them from AT&T is much higher than the payment that we received from VTEL, but there still will be another $20,000 or some odd $1,000 that will come into there before the end of the fiscal year. But on the same side, money's going to go out the door relative to the sidewalk project. So this is a report that I will try to do for you periodically, quarterly, like I do with the capital projects thing. So it gives you a good idea, because it's not driven by a budget; it's driven by a formula, and you should be aware of where we're at from availability. Item C, preliminary 1272 orders, sanitary sewer overflows. I've shared with you a draft 1272 order, and I give that to you because it was given to me out of courtesy from our contact person, who is Liz Dixon. This draft 1272 order is not a complete surprise to me. It's not our first 1272 order, and I can assure you that it is not your last 1272 order until we have shown years of never having any overflows from a pump station or a treatment plant into Otter Creek. We are still battling the infiltration that comes into our system. So from a time frame of this 1272 order, within the next week or so, this 1272 order will go through the notice process, whereby interested parties can file comments within a 30-day period, including the city council. All right, it's too early at this point to be commenting on that, because you're not in the formal notice period, nor is anyone else in that period. But at some point, it is going to be published, and it will go through that notice period for testimony, and then you will ultimately, I will be served with a 1272 order, which outlines what we need to do within the schedule prescribed in the 1272 order. I will tell you that Rick and I are already trying to get ahead of this a little bit in that we have been talking about going through a process through a request for qualifications program to get an engineer on board. And there's another gentleman by the name of Tom Brown who works at the same division as Liz, whereby we are able to obtain funding for this planning. It's not a grant, it's a deferred grant, if you will, because ultimately you are going to have to do some projects, and the planning, the cost of any planning can be rolled into the project and rolled into some future debt. So there'll be more on that in the next few months, I'm going to say. Northern Gateway Sidewalk Project bid opening. I shared with you a copy of the advertisement for bid, and I'm going to be away on vacation, but I'll be back to work on the 19th. The bid opening is on the 22nd, and I don't know whether or not, the only reason, I hope we get a good response, and I hope that we are within budget. And if we are within budget, I'll just tell you who the low bidder is, and off we go. If we don't get a low bidder, then I would come back to the city council to find out what you want to do, because one option, if we don't get favorable bids, is that there might need to be additional dollars allocated from the water tower fund towards this project, or you scrap it. And of course, if you scrap it, you lose all of the funding for the engineering that you spent. So But I really feel that this budget, I really feel that there is a lot of room in this, even including the bulb out plan across from the police station and the flashing beacon. I still feel confident that I won't be back to the city council asking for any additional money. Speaking about money, the City Hall conference room, let me tell you the predicament that I have is that the City Hall building maintenance budget is $4,000. At this point, I've spent $3,892.42, and it is not March 1 yet. There's a little bit of these dollars, and when I mean little, I'm talking about $200-300 is all that I've spent out of that towards this conference room project. So one of the things that I'm looking for tonight would be for authorization to use water tower funds towards this capital improvement. And I know that sounds like a blank check, but I think you all know me better than that I'm not going to drain the water tower fund, but I do want to not be using that line item too much more because there isn't enough money to finish that job. So I would like authorization to proceed, and I don't have a number for you. I still am waiting on Desiree relative to the door, so I don't have information, but I would like to have that project be recognized as a capital improvement and using water tower money for that project.
Before you go on.
Yeah.
So why don't we address that right now? So do you have a WAG?
Well, yeah, I do.
won't say
Right?
what
One
that
of the, I know what it means. So one of the things I will tell you that when I put in the application to the state of Vermont for the construction permit, I had to have a project estimate, and my estimate was $10,000. I really think that we should be able to do the room and buy furniture for the $10,000. So if you want to cap me at $10,000, I'm absolutely fine with that. I frankly don't think I'd spend half of it. But one of the keys deals with this glass door. So I would, sure, I'd love it if you allocated up to $10,000 for this project, and I'll keep you posted about every penny that goes towards it.
I think we could. A motion to allocate from the water tower fund up to $10,000. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. 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 Any opposed? No opposed? Okay.
So personnel policy update. In a previous email to you all, I sent you a draft personnel policy with, I'm going to say a lot of amendments, but I don't know that there's really a lot of meat there. So one of the things that I would like to do, all of these changes have gone out to the department heads. So it's gone out to you all. It's gone out to George, Rick, and Jim Larrow. It has not gone to Jim Brewer because he doesn't have full-time employees. Joan has it as well. Joan has almost made her way through it, and she hasn't got back to me. And Joan is really critical to this because she's the payroll officer. And I will tell you that there's a lot of things in here that I've got changed which really are intended to make her job easier and provide clarity to employees. There was a number of items in this personnel policy that, they ended up being omitted, not necessarily because of anybody's fault. It was like, oh, we didn't really think about that. So really, it's about clarity. Now, let me just tell you what I would love to be able to do would be for the city council to be able to take action on this at your March 27th meeting. And the reason is because relative to vacation accruals and holidays and all that type of thing, I really would like to get that in place. So one of the things that I would like, however you want to structure this, Rennie, I know, Mark, you've spent some time with this personnel policy. I have not reached out to Jill yet or Abigail, but I would...
Until all the pieces get together, there's no point in presenting her. But once we have something where all the department heads have given you something, you
Yeah.
one thing, then it would be good.
So I would love if you all, however you want, people want to deal with this, I'd like you to deal with it and somehow get back, and Joan and I need to get together as well, but I'd like to be able to get something in more final form for you to possibly consider on March 27th, but it does require some work. So anyway, that's, I mean, if it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world, but I just want to let you know, I'd like to get that in place.
So other than comments, what do you need from us?
Do I need from you? I do need to get, I could use some help, Mark, relative to anything that we're missing, all right? If you wouldn't mind helping out in that regard. I don't know. The other thing is, I certainly don't want the city council getting ahead of my department heads, all right? So Jim Laro has already met with his folks. They're all set. Rick is meeting with his, and I haven't talked to George about that. So you can see how I need everybody really focusing on this.
Until the 27th.
Well,
Get it to them before that,
yeah.
so that they can review.
Who?
The council.
They have it.
No, I'm saying the revised based on,
Any other comments?
yeah.
Okay.
And send it to me in Word.
Okay.
He sends it to me in a PDF.
Well, actually,
but
Joan, it's actually on the shared drive. You've always had it in Word. You just didn't know it.
I don't get it in the morning.
Okay, so that's that. And then the last thing, other topics of interest. So I've saved this other topic of interest. So this is a topic of interest. I have decided that I am not seeking reappointment as city manager at your first meeting in July. And so I want to let you know that. And that's why, if you're wondering why did I include that page in the charter, that's why, because the charter requires you to appoint a city manager at the first meeting of the fiscal year, and based on that calendar, it's July 24th. There is one more Tuesday in there, so you didn't quite go to July 31st, but anyway, based on that calendar, if July 24th is indeed your first meeting of the fiscal year, that will be my last day as city manager. The other announcement that I want to make is that although I have talked to the board about continuing on as zoning administrator and administrative assistant at the Board of Listers, I have decided that I am not interested in those positions. And I will not, along with being the planning commission clerk, Shannon, all of those positions I will not hold after July 24th. So I promised you that I'd give you 3 months. I'm giving you more than 3 months, but the same thing that I mentioned before, when I tell you this, you need to do something, all right? And so Rennie actually, he's known this over the weekend. And so I'm just gonna close under mine, and so we can move on to Rennie's report.
Which, yeah, that's a good segue right into it, because the first item on my list in my report is the City Manager Search Committee. Although I would make a comment about finding a zoning administrator. That's something we're going to have to move. Well, actually, I think it's the Planning Commission that actually has to do that.
Well, it comes back to you. The statute, my term is the one thing that I don't need to resign as city manager. My term runs out at the first meeting in July, so I'm just going to head off into the sunset. Relative to my zoning administrator position, I was appointed through June 30th, 2019, I believe, and so I will be resigning that position effective July 24th, 2018. The statute, the way that it works for zoning administrators, is that the city council appoints the zoning administrator. It's a 3-year appointment. I don't know about the balance of my term, but anyway, statutorily, it's a 3-year appointment. However, the statute calls for a recommendation from the Planning Commission. You don't need to follow the planning commission, but you are required to receive their recommendation, and then you make your decision. I think Shannon and I really haven't had any discussion. We've had a very quick email exchange, and I think one of the things that the city council and the planning commission and others really need to decide about zoning, about that position of zoning administrator and planning commission clerk, is really about how that's going to be done. All right, there certainly are towns that use part-time zoning administrators, but I will tell you and go on record, I'm a customer service guy, all right, and I really feel that one of the ways that we provide the best customer service is that you can call City Hall 40 hours a week and talk to somebody about zoning, and they're not being told, well, he'll be back here next Tuesday at 2, all right? I mean, I did part-time zoning here. I mean, I was working at Country Home Products, so it can work, but I can tell you from a customer service standpoint, if you have the ability to provide that service during normal business hours, it is a better job, but I'm going to leave that with you. You're going to do whatever you want to do come July 24th.
So what I was going to say is that we'll have to be moving on this pretty quickly, because in many respects, finding a zoning administrator may be more difficult than finding a city manager, just because of the nature of the job and the requirements that are necessary for that job to do it right. So that's another thing we'll be moving on. But anyhow, regarding the city manager search committee, I said at your last meeting that I would be putting together a search committee, and unless the council wants to do it in a different way, because you could do the search committee, that it would probably be a mayoral appointment. I sent to all of you the charge of the search committee. I have a few extra copies, not enough for the whole audience, but if you could pass that down to at least Andy getting some, and there's a couple more, so that you can see what the charge of the search committee is. And this may change as we go along, that we'll find that the charge needs to change. At any rate, the membership of the committee is 2 members of the city council, 1 city department head, 1 citizen of Vergennes, and 1 Vermont town or city manager. And so the people that I would be appointing to these positions are Jeff Fritz, who will also serve as chair of the committee, and the reason for that is that Jeff and Mark have worked on the job descriptions and done some research relative to city manager selection and so on, and I think that he would be good for that. And Lynn Donnelly, those would be the 2 council selections. The department head selection would be Chief Merkel. The citizen selection would be John Emerson. And probably a lot of you know John. He works for Orion Plumbing and Heating. He is a former city councilor, former commissioner of the water district, has been very active around town. He grew up here, and I think he would do a good job in that position. And then for the Vermont town or city manager, I'm selecting Carrie Johnson, who is the town manager of the town of St. Albans. And the reason for selecting her is that she was raised in Vergennes, and her parents, Roger and Susan Hayes, still live in Vergennes. So she's very acquainted with the community, and she's been a town manager for a number of years, and I think she would do a good job for us. So unless the council has objections to it being a mayoral appointment and those appointees, we would go forward with that as the search committee. Everything okay with you folks? Okay, thank you. All right, the next item that I have is relative to the complaint that was against the city manager and the city clerk, and my suggested way of dealing with it, and you can certainly say that you want it dealt with in a different way, but that this be dealt with in the context of their annual evaluations. which I think should be coming up in April. And if you agree with that mechanism for dealing with it, then I would like you to get your forms out, because we have the forms for evaluation, and start working on those and turning them in to me, so that sometime in April, hopefully I will get them all put together and into something that we can see as what the general thoughts were for the council, and have a meeting to discuss it and go forward from there. Any?
I'm sorry, Rennie, it's my understanding that's amenable to the complainant as well?
Yes.
That is handled during the annual performance appraisal?
That's correct.
Perfect.
Okay, next item is, it has been brought to my attention that some folks in the community feel that my position as mayor and also being president of the Vergennes Partnership is a conflict, or at least a perceived conflict. Personally, I don't think it is a conflict. It's a lot of work. I don't think it is a conflict, but it really is up to the council for you to make that decision as to whether it constitutes a conflict or a perceived conflict that would inhibit my abilities to serve as mayor. If you feel that it is a conflict or a perceived conflict in which something needs to be done, then I would resign as president of the partnership. Hopefully I could still stay on the board, but if not, then I would resign from that also. But it's entirely up to you. It's not my decision to make. I think by our conflict of interest things that when something comes up like this, it really is a decision of the council for one of their members. And even though I'm the mayor, I am one vote, and I'm a council member like you are. And so it is really up to you as to whether I should be doing anything about that or proceeding the way I am. I hate to just lay it on you, but, you know, it was laid on me, so.
Yeah, I don't see the conflict immediately, Rennie. As you said, and I thought Faith very eloquently stated earlier, that, you know, we are a board, we do have discussions, we do have healthy discourse within our team, and, you're a vote of 7. So I don't see where you could, hijack the council for the best interest of the partnership. So I don't have an issue.
And I have not voted when it has come up
Yeah.
to items that, financial or otherwise related to the partnership, and I don't intend to vote when that happens.
I don't see it.
Yeah, I think that the only thing is the appropriation, and I think obviously relative to that line item in the budget, that's an obvious disclosure on Rennie's part, but I'd have to read the conflict of interest policy again, but I don't see it.
I don't see it.
I don't know if I should appropriately speak to this, but as one of the founders of the partnership, I would like to say that I would have been in heaven, as most of us would have been, to see such a direct tie-in between City Hall and the Alderman and the partnership, because the relationship needs to be so strong and so bonded together in order to function well. So,
Well, if no one has an objection, I guess we'll continue on the way it is.
If you get out of
Thank
line,
you.
they'll probably tell you.
They probably will. So.
Now we have a deputy mayor.
So now, we move on to, I don't have any other items to talk about in my mayor's report, so I guess,
I'll make a motion to go into executive session.
Okay.
So, just so the motion's clear, it deals with the appointment of a public official, Joan?
and as I mentioned before, did somebody second that, by the way?
No.
Okay. That we will be coming back out into public session whenever we're done with this. It will be a public vote. And by the law that dictates this, not only is it a public vote, but there will be a statement as to why the person is chosen or not chosen. So that will be later on. I don't know how long it'll take us. You can stay and hold on until we come out, or read it in the newspaper.
Which we'll find out tomorrow morning.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to go into executive session. All those in favor of going into executive? Aye. We are back in open session from the executive session related to appointing a alderman. And would someone make a motion to elect?
David Austin as our new city council member effective March 7th, next Wednesday,
Okay.
for a one-year term.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. I would like to make a statement following that in accordance with the law, and that we are supposed to indicate why the selection was made. And the selection of David Austin is primarily because he has served as a city councilor before. He has done a lot in this community, and we feel that he can continue to do that. Why Faith Terry was not selected is that primary in our consideration was that we did not consider her to be a resident of Vergennes, meaning full-time living physically in the city. And also that there may have been a problem relative to a different law where she would be, if she's not considered a resident, then when she started her service and she is not a resident of the city, technically there would be a vacancy again, even though she was eligible to be appointed into the position initially. So we may not have interpreted the law correctly, but that is our decision, and that's the reason for it. I think we're all ready for
The motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Sorry for it going so.